Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison LaGrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison LaGrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has warned US President-elect Donald Trump against risking a war with a West Asian country. The Iranian leader says his country will react and respond to any provocation by the United States. Russia launches around 40 missiles and drones at energy plants across Ukraine. This just a day after Kiev launched its biggest aerial assault on Russian territory since the start of the conflict in 2022. Yoon Suk-yeol becomes South Korea's first sitting president to be arrested after investigators called barricades to take him into custody to question him over his brief-lived martial law decree last month. The Indian Navy commissions 3 warships together for the very first time. Prime Minister Narendra Modi hails the indigenously built and designed destroyer, frigate and submarine and calls them the key to the country's self-reliance goal. And the death toll jumps to 60 as more bodies of illegal miners are recovered from an abandoned gold mine in South Africa, where authorities blocked food and water access to force the miners out. Hello and welcome. Our top focus today is on Mozambique. The southern African country has inaugurated its new president, despite months of anti-government protests and violence that have left over 300 dead. Daniel Chapo of the ruling Frelimo party took oath as the president in a ceremony attended by over 2,000 people. He vowed to consolidate national unity amid an outcry over the presidential poll, the results which declared him the winner with a big majority.
I, Daniel Francisco Chapo, swear on my honor to respect and enforce the Constitution, to fulfill faithfully the office of President of the Republic of Mozambique, to devote all my energies to the defense, promotion and consolidation of national unity, human rights, democracy, and the well-being of the Mozambican people, and to do justice to all citizens.
Chapo's victory has extended his Frelimo's party's rule to almost 50 years. But the presidential runner-up and opposition leader Venancio Mondlane says the mandate has been stolen from him. Mondlane, for months, has mobilized protests against the poll result while being in a self-imposed exile. He returned to the capital last week and called for a national strike in the days leading up to the inauguration. He has threatened to curtail the new government with daily demonstrations.
So, how will this end? This is a typical example of how this government is not a government of peace, how this regime does not want peace. And if they don't want peace, it means we will not back down because of this. It means this term, if necessary, will be filled with protest 365 days a year. We'll protest every single day. If it means paralyzing the country for the entire term, we will paralyze it for the entire term. Let's see how they plan to govern this.
Security was beefed up in Maputo while the inauguration ceremony was taking place. Roads were blocked in the capital. The swearing-in ceremony was expected to be snubbed by foreign heads of state amid the violence. However, neighbouring South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa was at the ceremony. A day before the ceremony, the parliamentary lawmakers were sworn in amid relative calm, as streets were mostly deserted amid calls for protests. Still, at least 6 people were reportedly killed in the capital. As per reports, new President Chapo, who is expected to announce his new government this week, could make concessions by appointing opposition members to ministerial posts to quell the unrest. He has also said in the past that he wants dialogue with Mondlane over the election results. Mondlane, after returning from exile, also said he is ready for talks. But analysts say that Mondlane's return could further complicate the situation in the country. Many businesses have been vandalized and looted amid the chaos, while cross-border trade has been disrupted. There has also been an impact on the country's mining industry, risking the loss of trust of foreign investors and firms. And there are still concerns the unrest could spill over to other nations in the region, creating a wider crisis. As opposition vows to paralyze the nation under Chapo's rule, how will the new president navigate the crisis going forward? Now, for more on this, we have with us Wilke Diaz, a political analyst and an election observer. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Wilke, will Daniel Chapo being sworn in amidst the opposition boycott and the nationwide strike threats, what does this mean for the political stability of Mozambique in the coming months? Can Frelimo maintain control without addressing the opposition grievances?
So I think the first thing we can say is today the most part of Mozambican people have some hope. To be a very happy day, but in the history of our democracy, it's a very sad day. Very sad day because at the same time we saw the inauguration in the independence place. We also have some people are shooting by the police next, close to the independence place, and other in the other neighborhoods in Mozambique. For now, we have for today 7 people dead, not only in Maputo but also in Nampula province. So this is the one signal, because at the same time we have people in the streets are organized in groups to demonstrate in some parts. For example, if you go to in Maputo, we have in Machava, we have in Wish Cabral, and etc. On these places, we have a part of that group to try to make some demonstration. I think this is the one signal to say Daniel Chapo, maybe he don't have the simple things to take up our debt responsibility during these next years. I think the first thing he need to do is to try to create a condition for one dialogue with the Venancio Mondlane, the opposition leader. I think it's not only Daniel Chapo to make that decision, but also the Frelimo party. It's the one very important element to try to to try to create that condition to dialogue with Venancio Mondlane and the opposition parties.
Right. The opposition leader's call for a nationwide strike highlights the significant dissatisfaction with the electoral process. How likely is this to gain traction among the population, and could it lead to a broader movement against the government?
I think the most part of I start with the people in the streets. So many people right now are very satisfied because that results don't reflect on the electoral truth during this process. This is the first thing to do. Second, to talk about the opposition, I think we have one division. We have one part of that opposition or created that all problems. We have, for example, the principal party right now of the opposition, it's Podemos. Venancio Mondlane are not with Podemos right now. We have one separation with these two actors, but Podemos also go to the inauguration. Leader go to that inauguration today and go to the inauguration in the parliament before yesterday. So that is the one signal of our type of our political parties we have in Mozambique in the opposition. The most part of that parties don't give any importance to the people try to make some corrections in our electoral system, but it's not only in our electoral system, but in the democratic process. And we have the proof because the opposition, the president of Podemos said at before yesterday, he going to take a place he go to the inauguration because the problems in Mozambique in the electoral time happens all time. So for him, it's very normal. So I think if you want some strong democratic process in Mozambique, it's very important to try to cut that all problems. That is the one point I can say right now.
Right. Right. And how are international observers and neighboring countries responding to the contested election and today's inauguration? Could this lead to increased diplomatic or economic pressure on Mozambique?
We have 2 points. The first point to see the sensibility of the international community. It's very important to look at the numbers of the leaders of the countries or presidents of some countries we saw in the inauguration, only 2. That is the one signal. There's a signal to say the situation in Mozambique it's not good for now. A second thing we can say right now, it's we don't see, for example, we not see some ambassadors in the inauguration today, for example, of some countries. This is one response of the civil society action also, because we try to show what's happening in Mozambique. The electoral fraud is not the electoral fraud, but it's the violation of human rights inside of this whole process. And we share some letters for that leaders. And it's not only thing to do. We put yesterday one action in the African Court, African Commission of Human Rights, in the African Court. In the other part, we put one other actions to the African Union to try to stop, for example, to not recognize that a new government, to try to have some new elections. It's not for defend the Frelimo or Podemos, Venancio Mondlane or Daniel Chapo. The only thing most important for us is the true electoral truth. And this is why I said it's very important, a difficult process, because we have some leaders have some sensibility of this and other not. Because if you look, for example, in our region here in SADC, we have only one president, and this is the one reflection of the impact that a problem created in all our region.
Right. Well, thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa and for your valued insights and analysis on all the latest coming out of Mozambique.
Thank you so much.
Now let us shift our attention to the central part of the continent. The Democratic Republic of Congo is courting new investors in its mining sector. Reports suggest that the DRC, which is the world's top cobalt supplier, is wooing new investors from Saudi Arabia to invest in its mining sector. This is to help the Central African country to diversify and reduce its over-reliance on Chinese companies that are dominating the mining industry in the country. In an interview with Reuters news agency, Marcelini Palaku, who is a senior government official, said that the Chinese investors dominate the mining sector, which is now presenting a risk to the country's economy. Now, Paluku had added that the DRC was now trying to diversify its partnerships so the country does not have to rely on one partner. The official also noted that the country was talking to all the parties who are interested in doing business with the country. The DRC has also been reportedly courting the European Union and India to move away from the current joint ventures, which are heavily skewed in favor of Chinese investors. Chinese companies, some of which are state-backed, have over the past few years emerged as the biggest investors in the DRC. This is at a time when the world's second-largest economy has been aggressively looking to pursue copper and cobalt supplies for its rapidly expanding electric vehicle industry. The country currently owns 80% of the mines in the DRC. China has also been ramping up investments and production for copper and cobalt in the Central African country. Now, companies such as CMOC Group are now the world's biggest cobalt miners, as the Chinese company boots out the output at the Teneke Fugurumi mine in the DRC's south. Now, last year, reports suggested that Chinese construction companies had planned to invest up to $7 billion in infrastructure projects in the DRC. However, in recent months, Kinshasa has tried to pivot away from China's dominance over its mining sector. And there are a couple of reasons for this shift. The first one is the DRC's growing role in the international metal markets. The DRC recently overtook Peru to become the second-largest producer of copper and is by far the world's biggest source of cobalt. Both of these commodities are key to the global energy transition, and thus the DRC wants a bigger role. Then comes its growing frustration over the lack of influence over its mining industry. The Democratic Republic of Congo has limited control over its mining sector, particularly cobalt, which is a key resource in many electric vehicle batteries. The country accounted for about 3/4 of global output of the metal in 2023, but a spike in production by miners in the nation, particularly China's CMOC, has pushed prices to 8-year lows. And so the government is making strategic choices about who runs Congo's mines. In August last year, Kinshasa opposed a proposal by a mining company to sell its copper and cobalt mines in the Central African country to China's Norin Mining. In recent weeks, the government has also arrested several Chinese nationals who have been involved in illegal mining and smuggling in the country's east, which has been torn apart by a conflict for decades. In October, the DRC's mines minister also said that the Central African country had planned to streamline processes to pay customs and taxes, along with a partnership with the United Arab Emirates. Kinshasa has also planned to revamp a railway line used to transport minerals so that cargoes could more easily be exported from a port along the Atlantic Ocean. So as the DRC moves away from China by courting new investors, is this the beginning of the end of Xi Jinping's China dream in the Central African nation? Turning our focus to France's waning influence in Africa, with each passing day, Paris's relations with its former colonies and allies in the continent are plummeting. Almost every other day, the former colonial power is coming under fire from African nations for either its actions or statements from officials. The latest one to hit out at France is the West African country Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso's junta chief, Ibrahim Traoré, has said that the French President Emmanuel Macron has insulted all Africans. At a ceremony in the capital on Monday, Traoré, who was recently at the center of a controversy in Ghana, hit out at the recent remarks made by the French President on Africa last week.
He also insulted all Africans in his remarks. There was one part that caught my attention, where he spoke of ingratitude. And that ingratitude is a disease that cannot be transmitted to humans. He is human. Our ingratitude is not transmissible to him. This is how this gentleman sees Africa, sees Africans. We are not human in his eyes.
Traoré, who has been in power since 2022, has also accused Paris of reorganizing so that it could remain in the African countries that have driven out the French troops. Now, Burkina Faso junta leader also called on all African nations to break their military cooperation agreements with France.
They won't leave certain countries. They've just dissolved the devices. You won't see them in the bases, but in the embassies, they'll be there. They're going to set up security companies to protect their companies in those countries. But the soldiers will be there, but you won't see them in uniform or gathered in bases. That's all it means. They'll reorganize, but they'll be there.
Now, the junta chief's remarks were coming after Macron called some African leaders ungrateful at a foreign policy conference last week. Macron said that he was still waiting for the Sahel nations to thank France for stopping them from falling into the hands of Islamist militants, and further went on to dismiss suggestions that his country had been forced out of the Sahel region.
We had a secure relationship. In truth, it was of two kinds. One part was our commitment to fighting terrorism since 2013. We were right. I think some have forgotten to say thank you, but that's okay. It'll come in time. I'm in a good position to know that ingratitude is a disease that cannot be transmitted to humans. But I say this for all the African governments who have not had the courage, in the eyes of their public opinion, to bear it. None of them would be in a sovereign country today if the French army had not been deployed in this region.
Macron's comments have led to an uproar in Africa. Many of the French president's remarks were seen as echoing colonial rhetoric. African nations called these comments an insult to Africa, and Chad was among the first Sahel nation to do so last week. It asked Paris to learn how to respect Africans. Now, the country's president, Mohamed Idris Deby Itno, even said that Macron was living in the wrong era.
I'd like to express my outrage regarding recent remarks by President Macron, which border on contempt for Africa and Africans. I think he is in the wrong era.
Criticism of Macron's remarks also came from Senegal. The West African country's Prime Minister, Ousmane Sonko, lashed out at Macron, saying that France had neither the capacity nor the legitimacy to ensure Africa's security and sovereignty. Now, France has been facing major setbacks in Africa. African nations have often accused Paris of neo-colonial inclinations, and around 70% of the continent has already kicked out France and its troops that were stationed to fight the jihadist insurgency. It began with the military governments in West Africa. Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger were the first ones to cut ties with France and turn toward Russia. This was followed by Chad, which was France's key partner in the Sahel region. The country abruptly ended key defense and security agreements with Paris last year. Then Senegal and the Ivory Coast joined the France Out chorus and asked Paris to vacate military bases on their territory. Currently, France has troops stationed only in Djibouti and Gabon. France has also been engaged in a diplomatic row with Algeria. The dispute has stemmed from Paris's support for Morocco's claims over the Western Sahara region. The support to Morocco prompted Algeria to recall its ambassador from Paris last year. So, as African countries sharpen their criticism of France and Paris loses key allies in the continent, will Macron be able to win back the trust of the Francophone Africa? Or is this the end of friendly relations between the European power and its former colonies? And for our last story, we shift our attention to Ghana. The country's former president, Nana Akufo-Addo, who stepped down this month, is not getting away with the controversies surrounding him. A giant statue of Akufo-Addo, which he unveiled himself days ahead of his departure, has now been completely destroyed. But he need not be too disappointed, since Ghana's new government is going to investigate his pet project, a $400 million national cathedral, which the ex-president pledged to build in the glory and honor of God. Watch our next report for more details.
In Ghana's resource-rich western region, a giant statue today is in ruins. The statue is of Ghana's immediate former president, Nana Akufo-Addo. The 80-year-old stepped down as the country's president this month after serving 2 terms. Just days ahead of bidding farewell, He unveiled the statue of himself, but now the monument has been completely destroyed. The torso has been torn down, the severed head lies on the ground, the perpetrator and motives remain unknown. The giant statue was erected on the orders of the Western Region's minister, who called it a way to thank the ex-president for the work he did in the last 8 years. But the figure turned out to be a monument of mockery. It became a center of controversy as many in Ghana believed that the outgoing president's work did not merit unveiling a statue of himself. Many saw it as a way of self-glorification. They questioned the importance of the statue when several key projects remained incomplete. Many also highlighted the dwindling state of the economy in the country. Ghana has in recent years been experiencing its worst economic crisis in a generation. The cost of living crisis was a key campaign issue in last month's election, in which Nana Akufo-Addo's party candidate was heavily defeated. This paved the way for a big political comeback for John Mahama. Much like US President-elect Donald Trump, Mahama has now returned as Ghana's president after 8 years. And soon after coming to power, he is scrutinizing his predecessor's deeds. Ghana's new government is going to investigate ex-President Nana Akufo-Addo's pet project. At the center of it is the $400 million National Cathedral, which has sparked a major row in Ghana. It's a multi-denominational monumental undertaking to house religious services and state events. When President Akufo-Addo won the 2016 elections, he pledged to build the site in the glory and honor of God, who he said was gracious enough to grant him victory. But Ghana's economy could not meet the president's aspirations. Even though the leader said the project would be privately funded, around $58 million of taxpayers' money have been pumped into the project. The new government says nothing has been built to justify this huge amount. Currently, the project stands as a massive hole surrounded by wild plants at the heart of Accra. This hole also collected so much water that the opposition described it as the world's most expensive swimming pool. While some in Ghana have applauded Akufo-Addo for development projects, it seems he will be a leader remembered for some misplaced priorities.
And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.